talking about behaviors, one of our favorite things, I'm sure. But this is something that I get a lot of questions on for years. It's like, this is a conversation that parents and adults need to talk about, right? It's probably one of the first things that if you were going to counseling or you were going to ask someone who specializes in child development or some kind of modality that's good for kids, right? You're probably going to want to know, what do we do about this behavior? Like, we see this behavior all the time. We try all these things and feel a little stuck. So fair, super common. And of course, we all walk through that as parents. But what I want to start with is, I think this analogy, this question that really helps us tune in a little bit deeper than just trying to frantically problem solve, right? And it's the question of, how do you care for an infant? What do you do when an infant cries? So if you have not had an infant in your home, or if maybe you have a niece or nephew or a family member who has an infant, whatever your exposure to infants might be, most of us generally understand what we're going to do if a baby cries, right? So we've got, let's say, a 3-month-old, and that baby cries. Well, what do you or I do about it? We go and we investigate. All right, are they hungry? When was the last time they were fed? How's their diaper? Do they need a diaper change? And when's nap time? Are they tired? Did they just wake up and they're just a little fussy, still waking up, right? What's the sleep situation? We're assessing those. Those are kind of the first 3 things we check in on, right? Plus maybe things like, are they cold? Are they hot? Are they lonely? Do they just need to be kind of soothed and connected? So we do all of this. We meet their need. Maybe it's multiple needs at one time, right? But what did they do? All they did was cry. And yet we know, we check these things, we do these things, we respond in this way, and we meet that need so that the baby is soothed and we can all move forward. So when do we stop doing that? Somewhere along the way, most of us quit using that approach. And yet, I'm actually curious, if you were to start applying that with your older kids, with maybe even some of the adults in your life, what would that look like? So let's say we've got a behavior. We've got a kiddo who whines. We've got a kiddo who throws things. We've got a kiddo who, maybe we've got a teenager who slams their door. They stomp upstairs, they slam the door, they shut themselves in their room, right? Whatever the behavior might be, what would it look like if you applied this whole infant response to your 15-year-old, to your 6-year-old, and you were to think through, okay, first of all, when was the last time they ate? How's their blood sugar, right? When was the last time they had connection with someone and they felt seen and heard and connected? Because that's really important for all of us on a daily basis, right? I mean, hopefully you can think of times when you didn't feel seen or heard or connected to someone and probably started getting a little grumpy, or you started getting a little isolated or avoidant or whatnot, right? We all need connection. So maybe we think through, okay, when was the last time like they really felt connected and seen and valued? What about something like hydration? I mean, again, I can think through what it feels like as a relatively high functioning adult who's completely dehydrated, and you're probably not going to see my best if I'm super dehydrated. Same for our kids and our teens, right? Do they have the body awareness to know, ooh, I'm feeling dehydrated. Let me go drink some good electrolytes and water and hydrate. So are we thinking through some of those things? What about things like sensory stimulation? Are they overwhelmed? Is there a lot going on and they actually just need some space to calm down? Right, when we start to apply this lens of, let me pause and investigate. Now, some of that might be I'm doing that on my own. Some of it might actually be I'm going to my kiddo and I'm saying, hey, I heard you slam the door. Or, hey, I noticed you just threw your toy across the room. What's going on? What do you need? I'm here, right? What does it look like for us to lean into that moment in a similar way that we would with the 3-month-old of, okay, I'm here. I'm going to check on a couple things, right? I'm going to assess what time you ate and all these different things. What would it look like for us to apply that same thing with our older kids? And I'm curious what that might feel like for you. Because some of that might feel like, well, we expect them to know what it is and they need to just tell us, or they need to do it themselves. And yet when someone's so dysregulated, we as the adult, we as the caregiver, especially in the moment, if it's a caregiver to child situation, they might need us to come side by side and co-regulate with them and problem solve with them, not for them, and maybe not expecting them to do it on their own, but together. Because when we bring in that connection, that is a nutrient that helps us move forward in that behavior kind of problem solving too. So ultimately, it comes down to this. Behaviors are the language of felt needs and or unmet needs, right? When a baby cries, they are crying because they have a felt need. I need a diaper change. I need to be fed. I need connection. I need comfort. All right. And when our teenager slams the door, or they roll their eyes at us, or our 6-year-old throws their toy, or they hit their brother or sister, right? These behaviors are communicating something to us, and it's up to us to take the time to investigate. Now, honestly, a lot of this applies to our adult relationships too, right? When we have a family member, a spouse, a friend who's avoidant, who is quick to blame, who's fixated on something, who won't answer us, whatever that behavior might be, that's also worth investigating. So a lot of the principles ultimately that I tend to talk through in like a parent to child context, most of the time it's probably pretty parallel in its effectiveness with our adult to adult relationships too. Now the tone and the language might be a little different, but the principle applies. So remembering this, the behaviors are the language of felt needs and unmet needs. So take time to investigate those.